The dust cloud appeared on the horizon like a promise, or perhaps a threat, as the stagecoach rattled toward the small settlement of Montana City, Montana Territory. The year was 1878, and inside that lurching vehicle, Zara Newsom clutched a folded piece of paper in her gloved hands, her only possession beyond the clothes on her back and a small carpet bag containing a spare dress, a hairbrush, and her mother's locket. The name scrawled on that paper was all she had left of her old life in Philadelphia, a name and the desperate hope that it might lead to something more. "First time out west, miss." The elderly woman seated across from her smiled kindly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Zara nodded, attempting to return the smile despite her exhaustion. 6 days of travel had left her body aching and her spirit nearly broken. "Yes, madam. I've never been farther west than Pittsburgh until now. Visiting family, are you?" The woman's question seemed innocent enough, but Zara's throat tightened. "No, madam. I'm starting fresh." The woman's knowing glance told Zara she'd heard similar stories before, women fleeing scandal, heartbreak, or worse. The West was full of people running from something. Zara was no different, except perhaps in how little she had to sustain her journey. When the stagecoach finally groaned to a halt in front of Montana City's single hotel, Zara's legs trembled as she stepped down into the dusty street. The town wasn't much a main street with wooden buildings on either side, a church steeple in the distance, and mountains rising beyond. But it was far from Philadelphia, far from the shame and heartache that had driven her away. "Miss, your bag." The driver handed down her small carpet bag, giving her a curious once-over. "You got someone meeting you?" I hope so." Zara squared her shoulders, refusing to show how utterly terrified she felt. 22 years old and completely alone for the first time in her life. The late afternoon sun beat down as Zara made her way toward the Mercantile, the one place she might find information. The piece of paper in her hand bore a single name: Russell Young. Her father's friend from the war, possibly her last hope in the world. The bell above the door jangled as she entered the Mercantile, the scents of coffee, leather, and tobacco enveloping her. A gray-haired man looked up from behind the counter. "Afternoon, miss. What can I help you with?" Zara cleared her throat. "I'm looking for someone, a Mr. Russell Young." The shopkeeper's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Russ Young, what business you got with him, my father?" Zara hesitated. "My father was his friend from the war." "That's so." The man studied her with newfound interest. "Well, Russ has a ranch about 5 miles north of town. Comes in for supplies every Saturday." He glanced toward a wall calendar. "That'd be tomorrow." Tomorrow. Zara's heart sank. She had exactly $3.47 to her name, enough for one night at the hotel if she was lucky. "Thank you," she managed, turning to leave. "Miss," the shopkeeper called after her, "if you don't mind me asking, who's your pa?" "Colonel James Newsom." Zara watched recognition dawn in the man's eyes. "The Colonel Newsom, from the Pennsylvania 76th, yes, sir." The shopkeeper's expression softened. "Well, that changes things. Russ talks about your father, sometimes said he was the finest officer he ever served under." He paused. "Hotel's expensive these days. My wife runs a boarding house just down the street. If you're the Colonel's daughter, she'd be pleased to put you up for the night." Relief washed over Zara, but pride kept her spine straight. "I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense. Any daughter of Colonel Newsom's is welcome in Montana City." That night, in a small but clean room in Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, Zara stared at the ceiling and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Would Russell Young remember her father? Would he turn her away? She had nothing to offer but her name, no skills suited to frontier life. No money, nothing but desperate determination and the need to survive. sleep came fitfully, and morning arrived too quickly. After a breakfast she could barely touch, Zara changed into her second dress, a blue calico that had seen better days, and pinned her dark hair up as neatly as she could manage without a lady's maid. She'd once had fine dresses and servants before her father's death and her cousin's betrayal had stolen everything. "Mr. Young usually arrives around 10, Mrs. Peterson told her as Zara prepared to leave. "You'll find him at the mercantile first thing." "Thank you for your kindness," Zara said, meaning it deeply. "Just tell Russ that Martha Peterson says hello." The woman smiled warmly. "He's a good man, bit rough around the edges, but good to his core." The mercantile was busy with Saturday shoppers when Zara arrived. She positioned herself near the entrance, her heart pounding each time the bell jangled. After an hour of waiting, her legs ached and doubt began to gnaw at her resolve. What if he didn't come today? What if the door swung open and a tall man ducked to enter? The conversations in the store dimmed momentarily as several people called out greetings. Zara's breath caught in her throat. This had to be him. Russell Young stood over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin. His dark hair was shot through with silver at the temples, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a strong jaw. He wasn't handsome in the polished way of Philadelphia gentlemen, but there was something compelling about his presence. Zara guessed him to be in his mid-30s, younger than she'd expected for her father's friend. Mr. Peterson, the shopkeeper, caught Russ's eye and gestured toward Zara. The cowboy's gaze fell on her, curious but guarded. "Mr. Young." Zara stepped forward, willing her voice not to shake. "My name is Zara Newsom. Colonel James Newsom was my father." The change in Russell Young's expression was immediate surprise, then a flash of something like pain, quickly masked. "Colonel Newsom's daughter." His voice was deep, with a slight Western drawl. "I didn't know the colonel had a daughter." Zara's heart sank. "He spoke of you, sir. Said you were a man to be trusted." Russ studied her for a long moment. "The colonel saved my life at Gettysburg. I owed him everything." He paused. "What brings you to Montana City, Miss Newsom?" "It's a long way from Pennsylvania." The store had grown quiet, with several curious onlookers pretending not to listen. Zara lifted her chin. "Might we speak privately, Mr. Young?" He nodded once, gesturing toward the door. Outside, they moved away from the storefront, stopping near a hitching post where a magnificent chestnut horse waited patiently. "My father died 6 months ago," Zara began, forcing the words past the lump in her throat. "He left me in the care of my cousin who was not honorable in his guardianship. I had to leave Philadelphia. Your name was the only one my father had ever mentioned with true respect. I came west hoping." Her voice faltered. "Hoping what, Miss Newsom?" Russell's gaze was intense, searching her face. "Hoping you might help me find work, perhaps. A position as a teacher or a companion to a family." Zara swallowed hard. "I have nothing, Mr. Young, only my name." Russell's expression remained unreadable for several heartbeats. Then, to Zara's astonishment, one corner of his mouth quirked upward. "Your name," he said softly. "That's all I needed to hear, Miss Newsom." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Your father was the best man I ever knew." "If you're his daughter, that's recommendation enough for me." Relief made Zara's knees weak. "Thank you, Mr. Young." "Russ," he corrected her. "Friends call me Russ." He glanced toward the end of the street. "I've got a ranch about an hour's ride from here. My sister Ellen lives with me. She's been wanting help with the house and the garden. It's not fancy work, but it's honest, and you'd have a roof over your head." "I would be grateful for any position," Zara said quickly. "It's settled then." Russ nodded once, decisive. "Do you have belongings to collect?" "Just a small bag at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house." Martha Peterson, Russ's expression softened. Good woman. Her husband says you arrived yesterday. Yes, they were very kind to me. Folks here generally are. Russ glanced at the son. I'll finish my business at the mercantile, then we'll collect your things. We should reach the ranch before sundown. An hour later, Zara found herself perched somewhat precariously in front of Russell Young on his horse, her carpetbag tied behind the saddle. She'd never ridden this way before in Philadelphia. Ladies rode side saddle or in carriages, but Russ had assured her this was the quickest way back to the ranch. Hold on to the saddle horn, he instructed, his deep voice close to her ear. Copper knows the way home. The powerful animal moved beneath them, and Zara gasped as they started forward. Russell's arm tightened briefly around her waist, steadying her. You're safe, he said simply. Those two words, spoken with such quiet certainty, nearly undid her. When had she last felt safe? Not since her father's death, certainly. Not in her cousin Edward's house, where his increasingly unwelcome attentions had forced her to flee in the night. As they rode out of town and into the rolling grasslands beyond, Zara gradually relaxed into the rhythm of the horse's gait. Russell was solid behind her, his presence reassuring rather than threatening. The vastness of the Montana landscape spread before them, so different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia. It's beautiful, she murmured, as they crested a hill that revealed miles of golden prairie stretching toward distant mountains. Different from what you're used to, I expect. Yes, but there's something freeing about it, as though a person might breathe more deeply here. She felt rather than heard his soft chuckle. That's how I felt when I first came west, like I could finally breathe. After the war, Zara ventured. His response was non-committal. Your father, he was well before he passed. Zara's throat tightened, as well as could be expected. The war never truly left him. His heart gave out in the end. I'm sorry. The simple words carried genuine feeling. He was a good commander, cared for his men. He spoke of you, you know, said there was a young lieutenant who showed exceptional courage under fire. Russell was quiet for a moment. He said that, he did. He didn't speak of the war often, but when he did, your name came up. They rode in companionable silence after that, as the afternoon sun began its slow descent. Zara found herself studying the landscape, noting the occasional cluster of trees marking a creek, the distant dots of cattle grazing on the hillsides. Your ranch, is it large? She asked eventually. Decent size. Started with 40 acres when I came out in '67. Built it up to about 500 now. Run a few hundred head of cattle, keep some horses. And it's just you and your sister, and the hands 3 men who help with the cattle. Sam, Joe, and Miguel. Good men. Russell shifted slightly in the saddle. Ellen's been alone too much. Ranch life isn't easy on a woman, especially one used to society. She came out to keep house for me after her husband died in '73, but she misses having female company. I hope I can be of help to her, Zara said, meaning it. A woman who'd lost her husband might understand something of Zara's own losses. As the sun dipped lower, they crested another hill, and Zara spotted a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley alongside a meandering creek. A 2-story house formed the center, with a large barn, corrals, and several smaller outbuildings arranged around it. Smoke curled from the chimney, and even from this distance, Zara could see the neat garden beside the house. That's home, Russell said, a note of pride evident in his voice. Young's Crossing Ranch. The house grew larger as they approached, and Zara saw that it was built of solid logs with a wooden porch stretching across the front. Wildflowers grew along the path leading to the steps, and the windows gleamed in the late afternoon sun. It wasn't grand by Philadelphia standards, but it had a certain solidity that appealed to Zara immediately. As they rode into the yard, the front door opened, and a woman stepped onto the porch. Ellen Young was tall like her brother, with the same dark hair, though hers was pulled back in a simple bun. She wore a practical dress of brown calico with a white apron, and her expression was curious as she watched them approach. "You're back early, Russ," she called. "And with company, I see." Russell dismounted first, then reached up to help Zara down. Her legs felt wobbly after the long ride, and she was grateful for his steadying hands at her waist. "Ellen, this is Miss Zara Newsom," Russell said as they approached the porch. "Colonel Newsom's daughter." Ellen's eyes widened. "The Colonel Newsom. From the war." "The very same," Russell confirmed. "Miss Newsom has come west looking for work. I told her we could use some help around the place." Ellen's surprised expression gave way to a warm smile. "Indeed we could. Welcome to Young's Crossing, Miss Newsom." She extended her hand, which Zara took gratefully. "You must be exhausted after your journey. Come inside and rest while I prepare supper." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable, with handmade furniture and colorful quilts adding warmth to the main room. A large fireplace dominated one wall and bookshelves lined another, a sight that made Zara's heart leap. Books had been her solace in Philadelphia, and seeing them here, so far from civilization, felt like an unexpected gift. "You have a lovely home," Zara said sincerely. "It's a work in progress," Ellen replied, leading her to a rocking chair near the fire. "Russ built the main part when he first arrived, then added the second story last year. I've been trying to make it more homely, but there's always so much work to be done." She smiled ruefully. "Ranch life doesn't leave much time for niceties." "I'd be happy to help however I can," Zara offered, "though I should warn you I'm not very experienced with household tasks. We had servants in Philadelphia." "Don't worry about that. Anyone can learn." Ellen's kind eyes studied her. "You've come a long way, Miss Newsom. All alone. Please call me Zara. And yes, I traveled alone." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal of her circumstances. Ellen seemed to sense her discomfort. "Well, you're not alone now. We'll get you settled in the spare room upstairs. It's small, but it has a nice view of the mountains." Russell had disappeared to tend to his horse, and Zara found herself relaxing in Ellen's company. The older woman moved efficiently around the kitchen, preparing a simple meal of fried potatoes, beans, and biscuits. The domestic scene was so far removed from Zara's previous life that it seemed almost like a dream. "Russ doesn't usually bring strays home," Ellen commented as she worked, her tone light. "He must think highly of your father." "I gather they served together during the war." Ellen nodded. "The war changed him. He doesn't talk about it much, but I know he carries it with him still." She glanced toward the door. "Your father, he was Russ's commanding officer?" "Yes, in the Pennsylvania 76th, I see." Ellen's expression softened. "Well, that explains it then." "Russ has always felt he owes his life to the men he served with." She paused. "May I ask what happened to your parents, Zara? It's unusual for a young woman to travel so far alone." Zara's hands twisted in her lap. "My mother died when I was 12. Consumption. My father raised me after that, but he passed away 6 months ago. I was living with my cousin Edward, but—" She trailed off, unwilling to speak of Edward's increasingly forceful attempts to claim more than cousinly affection. Ellen nodded, seeming to understand what remained unsaid. "Well, you're welcome here for as long as you wish to stay." When Russell returned for supper, he changed his dusty clothes and washed up, though his dark hair still curled damply at his temples. He sat across from Zara at the table, his large hands incongruously gentle as he passed dishes. "I've put Miss Newsom in the spare room," Ellen informed him. "She'll help me with the house and garden if that suits." Russell nodded. Whatever arrangements you two ladies work out is fine by me." His eyes met Zara's briefly. "The ranch can be a lonely place. It'll be good to have another person here." "I'm grateful for the opportunity," Zara said, "and please, both of you should call me Zara." "Zara." Russell said her name thoughtfully, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "It's an unusual name. My mother chose it. It was the name of a queen in a story she loved as a girl." A small smile touched Russell's lips. "It suits you." That night, in the small but comfortable bedroom under the eaves, Zara lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Montana night. Crickets chirped outside her window, and occasionally she heard the distant lowing of cattle. It was so different from Philadelphia's busy streets, yet somehow she felt more at peace here than she had in months. Russell Young wasn't what she'd expected. From her father's stories, she'd imagined an older man, perhaps a grizzled veteran like so many she'd seen in Philadelphia. Instead, she'd found a man still in his prime, with kind eyes that held shadows of the past. A man who'd offered her shelter based solely on her name and her father's memory. Sleep eventually claimed her, and she dreamed of open plains and endless sky. The following days brought a new routine. Zara rose early, helping Ellen prepare breakfast for Russell and the ranch hands before they rode out to work with the cattle. The house, while solidly built, needed a woman's touch in many ways. Zara threw herself into cleaning, mending, and learning to cook frontier style, determined to earn her keep. Ellen proved to be a patient teacher and welcome companion. A widow of 40, she had a practical approach to life, but also a surprising streak of romantic imagination that revealed itself in the evenings when she read aloud from novels or recited poetry she'd memorized in her youth. "I always wanted to be a teacher," she confided to Zara one afternoon as they hung laundry in the warm June sunshine. "But life had other plans." "It's not too late," Zara suggested. "Montana City has a school, doesn't it?" Ellen laughed. "Yes, but they have a teacher already, a young man from Boston who came west for his health. Besides, Russ needs me here." "He's lucky to have you," Zara said sincerely. "This place would fall apart without your care." "Oh, Russ would manage. He managed alone for years before I came." Ellen pinned a shirt to the line. "But he deserves more than just managing. He deserves a real home." Zara had seen little of Russell during her first week at the ranch. He left before dawn each day and often returned after dark, busy with the spring cattle work. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but reserved, as though uncertain how to interact with this unexpected addition to his household. On Sunday, however, the rhythm of ranch life changed. Ellen announced at breakfast that they would be attending church in Montana City, and Zara felt a flutter of nervousness at the prospect of meeting the townspeople in her limited wardrobe. "Don't fret," Ellen assured her, noting her expression. "No one expects Eastern fashions out here." They rode to town in the wagon, Russell handling the team of horses with easy skill. Zara sat between him and Ellen on the wooden seat, acutely aware of Russell's arm occasionally brushing against hers as he guided the horses. Montana City's church was a simple white building with a modest steeple, but it was filled to capacity when they arrived. Zara felt curious eyes upon her as Russell escorted her and Ellen to a pew near the back. Whispers followed them, not malicious, but interested. "That's the Colonel's daughter. Staying at Young's Crossing. Came all the way from Philadelphia." After the service, Zara found herself surrounded by townspeople eager to make her acquaintance. Martha Peterson embraced her warmly, and several other women introduced themselves with friendly curiosity. "We don't get many Eastern ladies out here," explained Mrs. Henderson, the doctor's wife. "Especially not ones with your refinement. I'm hardly refined anymore, Zara demurred. I've been learning to cook over an open hearth and wash clothes in a creek. The women laughed appreciatively. You'll get used to it, Mrs. Henderson assured her. We all did. As the crowd thinned, Zara noticed Russell standing apart, speaking with a tall, elegantly dressed woman whose golden hair was arranged in an elaborate style more suited to St. Louis than Montana territory. The woman rested her hand on Russell's arm with familiar ease, and her laughter carried across the churchyard. That's Charlotte Wilcox, Ellen murmured, following Zara's gaze. Her father owns the largest ranch in the county. She's had her eye on Russ for years. Oh. Zara felt an unexpected twinge that she refused to identify as jealousy. Are they courting? Not exactly, though not for lack of trying on her part. Ellen's tone was neutral. Charlotte wants to be the most important rancher's wife in the territory. Russ is resistant to her charms. Before Zara could respond, Russell approached with Charlotte Wilcox on his arm. Miss Newsom, may I present Miss Charlotte Wilcox? Charlotte, this is Zara Newsom, daughter of my former commanding officer. Charlotte's smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she assessed Zara. How interesting. And you've come all the way from Philadelphia. That must have been quite a journey. It was long, yes, but worthwhile. Zara met the other woman's gaze steadily. And you're staying at Russell's ranch. How unconventional. Charlotte's tone made the arrangement sound scandalous. Miss Newsom is helping Ellen with the house, Russell said, his voice taking on an edge Zara hadn't heard before. The colonel was a great man. It's an honor to help his daughter. Charlotte's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. Of course, family connections are so important. She turned to Russell with a practiced smile. You will join us for dinner next Sunday, won't you? Father is expecting you, and we're having several important cattle buyers from Chicago. Russell hesitated, glancing briefly at Zara. I'll have to see how the work stands. We're branding the spring calves this week. Charlotte's smile tightened. Well, do try to make it. The buyers are particularly interested in discussing your breeding stock. She nodded coolly to Zara and Ellen. Ladies, a pleasure. As she walked away, Ellen sighed. That woman could freeze hell itself with that smile. Russell ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. Charlotte's father is an important business connection. I have to maintain good relations with the Wilcoxes. Of course you do, Ellen agreed, though her tone suggested otherwise. Just like you have to maintain good relations with that rattlesnake that lives under the South Pasture Rock. Russell's unexpected laugh broke the tension, and Zara found herself smiling as well. The wagon ride back to the ranch was pleasant, with Ellen recounting town gossip and Russell occasionally adding dry comments that revealed a sense of humor Zara hadn't glimpsed before. By the time they reached Young's Crossing, the encounter with Charlotte Wilcox had faded from Zara's mind, replaced by the simple pleasure of this new companionship. That evening, as Ellen retired early with a headache, Zara found herself alone with Russell for the first time. They sat in companionable silence before the fire, Russell cleaning his revolver while Zara mended one of his shirts. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly, how quickly she'd adapted to this new life, how comfortable she felt in this man's home. You're settling in well, Russell observed, as if reading her thoughts. Ellen says you're a quick learner. She's a patient teacher. Zara tied off a thread. I want to be useful here. You are. Russell reassembled his revolver with practiced movements. The place feels different with you in it, brighter somehow. The compliment warmed her unexpectedly. Thank you for taking me in. I know it must have been a surprise when I appeared in town. A welcome one. Russell set the revolver aside, his eyes meeting hers across the room. Your father was a good man, Zara, the best kind of man. He talked about his daughter sometimes, how smart she was, how proud he was of her. Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. He never told me that. Men of his generation rarely did. Russell's voice was gentle. But he carried your picture in his pocket watch, showed it to me once after Gettysburg, said his little girl was the reason he had to survive the war. A tear slipped down Zara's cheek. I miss him, I know. Russell hesitated, then asked, would you tell me what happened? After the war, I mean. The colonel was well when I last saw him in '65. Zara set her mending aside. He came home changed, like so many did. He tried to return to his law practice, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. He became involved in veterans' affairs instead, helping soldiers who'd come home wounded or destitute. She smiled sadly. He spent more of his fortune than he should have helping others. When he died, there was little left. And you went to live with your cousin. Edward was my father's nephew. He offered to become my guardian, as I was not yet 21 when father died. He seemed kind at first, but Zara hesitated, unwilling to speak of Edward's increasingly forceful advances, his drunken attempt to enter her bedroom one night. It became clear that his intentions were not honorable. I left the night I turned 22, when my inheritance, what little remained, became legally mine. Russell's expression darkened. This Edward, did he hurt you? No, not physically at least, but I couldn't stay. So you remembered a name from your father's war stories and traveled 2,000 miles on faith. Russell shook his head, a note of admiration in his voice. That took courage, or desperation, Zara admitted, but I'm grateful it led me here. Russell studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. So am I. The following week brought a flurry of activity to the ranch as the spring branding began in earnest. Ranch hands from neighboring properties arrived to help, turning Young's Crossing into a hive of activity. Zara and Ellen worked from dawn until dusk, preparing meals for hungry men who came in shifts, their clothes dusty and bearing the acrid scent of singed hair and hide. Russell seemed transformed during this time, more animated, shouting orders across the corral, moving with confident authority among men who clearly respected him. Zara found herself watching him when she brought water to the workers, admiring the fluid way he handled both cattle and horses. Never seen the boss smile so much during branding, commented Sam, the oldest of Russell's regular hands, as Zara refilled his cup one afternoon. Must be the company we're keeping these days. Zara blushed and moved on quickly, but the comment lingered in her mind. Did Russell smile more now? And was it because of her presence? The thought was both thrilling and frightening. She'd come west seeking safety and work, not romantic entanglements. Yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when Russell's eyes met hers across the yard, or the warmth that spread through her when he complimented her improving cooking skills. On the third night of branding, after the visiting hands had departed for their own ranches, Russell joined Zara on the porch. The evening was warm, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of spring flowers from Ellen's garden. You've been working too hard, Russell observed, leaning against the porch railing. Ellen says you're up before dawn and the last to bed. I don't mind, Zara smiled. It's satisfying work knowing I'm contributing. Russell studied her for a moment. You're different from what I expected. Oh, what did you expect? An Eastern lady, too delicate for ranch life. Someone who'd be crying to return to civilization within a week. He smiled slightly. Instead, you've jumped into everything without complaint, even when Ellen had you hauling water and scrubbing floors. Philadelphia ladies aren't as delicate as you might think, Zara replied, thinking of her mother who'd managed their household with quiet efficiency despite her illness. And I've found I prefer honest work to idle comfort. Still, you deserve some enjoyment too. Russell straightened. There's a dance in town Saturday next. Nothing fancy, just a community gathering at the schoolhouse. Would you like to go?" Zara's heart quickened. "A dance? Ellen would come too, of course," Russell added hastily. "Most of the county turns out for these things. Might help you meet more people, make some friends." "I'd like that very much," Zara said, trying to contain her excitement. She hadn't attended a dance since before her father's death, when Philadelphia's social season had been part of her regular life. Russell nodded, seeming pleased. "Good. That's settled then." The next few days passed in a blur of continued work, but now Zara had something to anticipate. Ellen seemed equally excited about the dance, producing a trunk of fabric scraps from which they might fashion Zara a new dress. "Nothing elaborate," Ellen cautioned as they sorted through the colorful pieces, "but something fresher than your travel dress." They settled on a pattern for a simple gown of deep blue cotton with white trim at the collar and cuffs. Zara worked on it in the evenings after her chores were done, grateful for the sewing skills her mother had insisted she learn despite their comfortable circumstances in Philadelphia. "Every woman should know how to use a needle," her mother had said. "Even queens have been known to sew in times of necessity." By Saturday, the dress was finished not as elegant as her Philadelphia gowns had been, but pretty in its simplicity. Ellen helped her arrange her dark hair in a style that was practical yet becoming, with soft curls framing her face. "You look lovely," Ellen pronounced when they were ready. "Russ won't be able to take his eyes off you." "Ellen," Zara protested, feeling her cheeks warm, "Mr. Young is simply being kind to his employee." Ellen's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise, but she said nothing more as they went downstairs to meet Russell. He waited by the wagon, dressed in clean dark trousers and a white shirt with a string tie. His usual hat was replaced by a newer one, and he'd trimmed his beard. The transformation from working rancher to gentleman was striking, and Zara felt a flutter in her stomach as his gaze fell on her. "You look beautiful, Miss Newsom," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Thank you, Mr. Young," she replied formally, though a smile tugged at her lips. "And thank you for the invitation." The schoolhouse was transformed when they arrived, with lanterns hanging from the rafters and benches pushed back against the walls to create a dance floor. A small group of musicians, 2 fiddlers, a guitar player, and a man with a harmonica were setting up in one corner, while tables laden with food and punch lined another wall. The room quickly filled with ranching families, townspeople, and a few prospectors from the hills beyond Montana City. Zara was introduced to so many people that names began to blur together, though everyone was welcoming. "Russell Young bringing a lady to the dance now, that's something we haven't seen before," she overheard one older woman comment to another. "Ellen says she's the daughter of Russ's commander from the war." "Pretty little thing," the other woman replied. "Wonder what Charlotte Wilcox thinks of her." Zara didn't have to wonder long. Charlotte arrived fashionably late, wearing an elaborate green dress that must have come from St. Louis or even Chicago. She made a striking entrance on the arm of her father, a heavy-set man with a florid face and an air of importance. "The local royalty has arrived," Ellen murmured to Zara as the crowd parted for the Wilcoxes. "Richard Wilcox owns half the county and wants the rest. Charlotte is his only child and stands to inherit everything." Charlotte's gaze swept the room and fixed on Russell, who was speaking with the town's mayor near the punch table. Her smile brightened, and she made her way directly toward him, leaving her father to greet other important citizens. "Russell, darling, you made it after all," Charlotte's voice carried across the room as she placed her hand on his arm. "I was so disappointed when you couldn't come to dinner last Sunday." Russell stepped back slightly, maintaining a polite distance. "Miss Wilcox, you're looking well." "Charlotte, please, We've known each other far too long for formality." Her laugh was musical but calculated. "You must save me a dance tonight." "Of course." Russell's tone was neutral. "If you'll excuse me, I should check on my sister and our guest." He moved away, returning to where Zara and Ellen stood watching the exchange. "Charlotte's in fine form tonight," Ellen commented dryly. "She seems determined," Zara observed. "She is that." Russell's expression was unreadable. "The music's starting. Would you care to dance, Miss Newsom?" Zara's heart leapt. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Young, though I should warn you I'm only familiar with Eastern dances." "These aren't so different," he assured her, leading her toward the floor. "Just follow my lead." The music was lively, a Virginia reel that had couples forming lines and moving in intricate patterns. Zara found herself laughing as Russell guided her through the steps, his hand warm and steady when it clasped hers. He moved with surprising grace for such a large man, and his rare smile appeared more frequently as they danced. Throughout the evening, Zara danced with several partners: the schoolteacher, the young doctor, and even Richard Wilcox, who questioned her at length about her father's military service. But it was the dances with Russell that she enjoyed most, even as she felt Charlotte Wilcox's cold gaze following them around the floor. During a break in the dancing, Zara stepped outside for some fresh air. The night was clear, stars blazing overhead in a way they never had in Philadelphia's smoke-filled sky. She was admiring the constellations when the schoolhouse door opened behind her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Russell's voice was quiet as he joined her. "Never saw stars like this back east." "It's magnificent." Zara wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders as a cool breeze stirred. "Everything here is so vast. It makes one feel small, yet somehow part of something greater." Russell nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's why I stayed. Came out after the war thinking I'd work a few years, save some money, maybe go back east eventually, but this land gets under your skin." He gestured toward the distant mountains, silver-tipped in the moonlight. "It becomes part of you. I can see why." Zara hesitated, then added, "Thank you for bringing me tonight. I've enjoyed myself more than I have in years." "I'm glad." Russell's voice softened. "You deserve some happiness, Zara." The way he said her name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the night air. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, until the schoolhouse door opened again and Charlotte Wilcox emerged. "Oh, Russell, there you are." Her tone suggested surprise, though her calculating gaze moving between them belied it. "Father is ready to leave, and he wanted to speak with you about those bulls from your new bloodline." "Of course." Russell nodded politely. "If you'll excuse me, Miss Newsom, I'll only be a moment." As he went inside with Charlotte, Zara remained on the porch, her earlier contentment dimmed. Charlotte's possessive manner toward Russell was unmistakable, as was her barely concealed hostility toward Zara. Could there be more between Russell and Charlotte than Ellen had implied? The thought brought an unexpected pang of jealousy. In the weeks since she'd arrived at Young's Crossing, Zara had come to admire Russell deeply: his quiet strength, his kindness, his unwavering sense of honor. But she had no claim on his affections, nor any right to feel disappointed if his interests lay elsewhere. The ride home was quieter than the journey to town had been. Ellen dozed against Zara's shoulder, exhausted from the evening's festivities. Russell handled the team with his usual competence, but seemed lost in thought. "Did you enjoy the dance?" he asked eventually, his voice low so as not to wake his sister. "Very much," Zara replied honestly. "Everyone was so welcoming. Most folks are out here. Life's too hard to waste energy on pettiness." He paused, "though some manage it anyway." Zara wondered if he was referring to Charlotte's barely veiled barbs throughout the evening. "Miss Wilcox seems very devoted to you." Russell's hands tightened on the reins. Charlotte has plans for her future that she believes I fit into. I've never encouraged those plans. I see. Zara wasn't sure why this information relieved her so much. Her father's the most powerful man in the county, Russell continued. Owns the bank, has the ear of the territorial governor. A connection to the Wilcoxes would benefit any rancher, but not you. Russell glanced at her, his expression hidden in the darkness. I learned during the war that some prices are too high, no matter the advantage gained. They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence filled with unspoken understanding. By the time they reached the ranch, Ellen had woken, and the three of them made their way into the house together, a cohesive unit that felt increasingly like family to Zara. The days following the dance brought changes to Young's Crossing. With the branding finished, attention turned to repairing winter damage to fences and outbuildings. Russell spent more time near the main house, often working within sight of the kitchen window where Zara prepared meals or preserved early summer vegetables from the garden. Sometimes she would bring him water or coffee, using these brief interactions to learn more about ranch operations. Russell proved to be a patient teacher, explaining cattle breeding techniques or demonstrating how to repair a broken harness. Zara absorbed it all eagerly, finding that she enjoyed the practical aspects of Western life far more than she'd expected. "You've got a natural way with animals," Russell observed one afternoon as Zara helped him doctor a calf with an infected eye. She held the animal steady while he applied a salve, her touch calming the frightened creature. "Most city folks are scared of anything bigger than a house cat." "I always wanted a horse when I was young," Zara admitted. "Father promised me one when I turned 16, but by then the war had changed everything." She stroked the calf's soft neck. "I like being useful this way. In Philadelphia, ladies weren't supposed to do anything practical, just look decorative and make good marriages." Russell's hand stilled. "Is that what you wanted? A good marriage?" Zara considered the question. "I wanted what my parents had, a partnership based on respect and affection, but such matches seem rare." She thought of the society marriages she'd witnessed, arrangements of convenience between families of similar standing. "After Father died, my cousin was determined to find me a suitable husband, preferably one who would allow Edward to continue managing my inheritance." "But you left instead." "I left." Zara's voice strengthened. "I decided I'd rather face the unknown than be sold into a loveless marriage." Russell released the calf, which scampered away to rejoin its mother. "Brave decision. Or foolish. I had no idea what awaited me out west." "And now?" Russell's gaze met hers, searching. "Do you regret coming?" "Not for a moment," Zara answered without hesitation. "I've found more here in 2 months than I had in Philadelphia after Father died. Purpose, respect." She paused, suddenly shy. "Friendship." Something flickered in Russell's eyes, a warmth that made Zara's breath catch. Before he could respond, however, they were interrupted by the arrival of Miguel, one of the ranch hands, riding hard into the yard. "Boss, riders coming, looks like Wilcox and his men." Russell's expression shifted immediately, the personal moment broken. "How many?" "4. Mr. Wilcox, Miss Charlotte, and 2 hands." Russell nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. "Tell Ellen we have company. Miss Newsom, you might want to." "I'll help Ellen prepare refreshments," Zara said quickly, understanding his concern. Her dress was dusty from the corral, her hair coming loose from its pins. By the time the Wilcox party arrived, Zara had changed into a clean dress and helped Ellen set out coffee and the previous day's apple cake on the porch. She stood slightly behind Ellen as the riders dismounted, noting Richard Wilcox's expensive riding clothes and Charlotte's fashionable riding habit. Young, Wilcox boomed, striding forward with the confidence of a man accustomed to deference. "Fine day for a ride, isn't it, Mr. Wilcox?" Russell shook the man's hand. "What brings you out this way? Those bulls of yours. Been thinking about what you said at the dance. Might be interested in buying a couple for my breeding program." Wilcox's gaze shifted to Zara. "And who's this lovely young lady?" "Don't believe we were properly introduced at the dance." "This is Miss Zara Newsom," Russell said. "Colonel James Newsom's daughter from Philadelphia. Zara, Richard Wilcox and his daughter Charlotte." "Colonel Newsom," Wilcox's eyebrows rose. "The war hero. Well, well. Any relation to the Newsom shipping family? My grandfather founded Newsom Shipping," Zara acknowledged. "Though the company passed out of family hands some years ago." "Fascinating." Wilcox's assessment of her seemed to shift, interest sharpening. "Old Eastern family, then." "What brings you to our little corner of the frontier, Miss Newsom?" "A desire for new experiences, Mr. Wilcox." Zara smiled politely, unwilling to share her true circumstances with this man whose calculating gaze reminded her uncomfortably of her cousin Edward. Charlotte stepped forward, her green eyes cool as they swept over Zara's simple dress. "How brave of you to venture so far from civilization. I can't imagine leaving behind all the comforts and refinements of Eastern society." Her smile was sharp. "Though I suppose some circumstances might necessitate such dramatic changes." The implication was clear. Charlotte suspected Zara had left Philadelphia under some cloud of scandal. Before Zara could respond, Ellen intervened smoothly. "We've prepared some refreshments. Won't you join us on the porch while Russell shows Mr. Wilcox the bulls?" The men departed for the south pasture, leaving the three women in an uncomfortable tableau on the porch. Charlotte declined Ellen's offer of cake with a dismissive wave. "I never indulge in sweets. One must maintain one's figure, especially as we age." Her pointed glance at Ellen's comfortable curves was intentionally insulting. "How fortunate that some of us need not worry about such things," Ellen replied mildly. "Russ has always said he prefers women who enjoy life's pleasures without constant concern for appearances." Charlotte's smile tightened. "Russell and I have known each other for years, Miss Young. I believe I understand his preferences quite well." Zara sipped her coffee, unwilling to be drawn into this subtle battle. She'd seen similar skirmishes in Philadelphia drawing rooms and had no desire to participate. Charlotte turned her attention to Zara. "Tell me, Miss Newsom, how long do you intend to remain in our little community? Surely a woman of your background must find Montana territory limiting." "On the contrary," Zara replied calmly, "I've found it quite liberating. There's a honesty to life here that I find refreshing after Eastern society's endless pretensions." Charlotte's eyes narrowed at the implied criticism. "How? Provincial? Though I suppose if one has experienced certain setbacks in society, such a perspective might be consoling." "I've experienced many things, Miss Wilcox, including the recognition that true worth is not measured by social standing or material possessions." Zara met the other woman's gaze steadily. "My father taught me that character reveals itself most clearly in how one treats those from whom one has nothing to gain." A flush spread across Charlotte's fair features. Before she could respond, the men returned from their inspection of the bulls, Wilcox looking pleased and Russell impassive. "Fine animals, Young," Wilcox announced. "We'll take 2 of them. Have your men deliver them next week." He turned to Zara with renewed interest. "Miss Newsom, you must join us for dinner soon. Any daughter of Colonel Newsom would be most welcome at Wilcox Ranch." "Thank you for the invitation," Zara replied noncommittally. "Perhaps when my duties here permit," Wilcox laughed. "Duties? Surely Russell isn't working you too hard." He glanced at Russell. "Young, you can't have the daughter of an Eastern gentleman doing servant's work. It isn't fitting." "Miss Newsom chooses her own activities," Russell said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She's a valued member of this household, not a servant." Wilcox raised his eyebrows but didn't press the point. After a few more minutes of conversation, the Wilcox party departed, Charlotte casting a final measuring look at Zara before mounting her horse. "Well," Ellen said as they watched the riders disappear down the road, "that was illuminating." "Indeed," Russell agreed, his expression thoughtful. "Wilcox has never shown interest in my bulls before. Something's changed." "Perhaps it was learning about Miss Newsom's background," Ellen suggested. "Richard Wilcox collects connections to Eastern money and power like some men collect stamps." "I have no connections to offer," Zara objected. "My family's fortune is gone." "But the name remains," Russell pointed out. "And names still mean something, even out here." He looked troubled. "Be careful around Wilcox, Zara. He's not a man to cross, and he always has an agenda." That evening, as Zara helped Ellen with mending by the fire, the older woman broached the subject again. "Charlotte seemed particularly venomous today," Ellen observed. "You must have made quite an impression at the dance." "She seems very possessive of your brother," Zara replied carefully. "Charlotte decided years ago that Russ would make a suitable husband. Her father approved. He's always wanted to merge our properties." Ellen set her needle down. "But Russ has resisted. Says he married once for the wrong reasons and won't do it again. Russell was married before." This was the first Zara had heard of a previous wife. Ellen nodded. "Briefly, during the war, a hasty marriage before his regiment shipped out. She was the daughter of a family friend, pretty but very young. When Russ came home in '65, they tried to make it work, but—" She sighed. "He'd seen too much, changed too much. She wanted Philadelphia society and a husband who'd never awaken screaming from nightmares. They parted ways in '66, and he came west soon after." Zara absorbed this new information. "Does he ever speak of her?" "Never." Ellen's tone was final. "It's a closed chapter for him." But Zara found herself wondering about this unknown woman who had once been Russell Young's wife. Had he loved her? Did he still carry that pain alongside the scars of war? She was still pondering these questions later that night when a sound from outside her window woke her. Sitting up in bed, Zara listened intently. There it was again, a rhythmic thudding like someone chopping wood. At midnight. Curious, she wrapped her shawl around her nightdress and moved to the window. In the moonlight, she could make out a figure in the yard below Russell, splitting logs with focused intensity, as if the physical exertion might drive away some inner demon. Zara watched for several minutes as he swung the axe with mechanical precision, his movements powerful and controlled. There was something deeply personal about the scene, as though she were witnessing a private battle. Eventually, he stopped, leaning on the axe handle, his head bowed. The vulnerability in his posture made her heart ache. Without conscious decision, Zara found herself moving quietly down the stairs and out onto the porch. The night air was cool against her skin as she stepped into the yard. "Russell," she called softly. He straightened immediately, turning toward her voice. "Zara, what are you doing awake? I heard you." She moved closer, moonlight silvering her dark hair. "Is everything all right?" For a moment she thought he might dismiss her concern with some practical explanation. Instead, he sighed deeply. "Bad night. Happens sometimes. The war?" she asked gently. He nodded once, setting the axe aside. "Dreams, always the same ones. Antietam, Gettysburg, Cold Harbor." Names that had become synonymous with slaughter. "Your father was there for all of them." "He had nightmares too," Zara said, remembering how she'd sometimes hear her father pacing the hall outside her bedroom in the small hours of the morning. "He said the memories never really leave." No, they don't. Russell gestured toward a nearby bench. You shouldn't be out here in your night clothes. People would talk. There's no one to see but you, Zara pointed out, but moved to the bench anyway. After a moment's hesitation, Russell joined her, keeping a respectful distance between them. Ellen told me you were married once, Zara said after a silence. During the war. Russell's hands clenched briefly on his knees. Ellen talks too much. She cares about you, as do I. The admission slipped out before Zara could consider its implications. Russell turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. You shouldn't. Care about me, I mean, I'm not. He paused, searching for words. I'm not the man I was before the war, not the kind of man someone like you should care for. You don't know what kind of man I should care for, Zara said softly. My father respected you deeply. That's recommendation enough for me. Your father saw me at my best, leading men doing my duty. Russell's voice roughened. He didn't see what came after, the nightmares, the anger. The ways the war hollowed me out. He understood more than you think. Zara hesitated, then added, He once told me that the measure of a man isn't found in his darkest moments, but in how he finds his way back to the light. Russell was silent for a long moment. Your father was a wise man. Yes, he was. Zara shivered slightly as a cool breeze stirred. You're cold. You should go inside. Russell stood, offering his hand to help her up. When she placed her fingers in his, the contact sent warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with temperature. Will you be all right? She asked, looking up at him. I will. Something in his expression softened. Thank you, Zara, for what? For caring. For seeing me as I am and not turning away. His voice was low, intimate in the darkness. For a heartbeat, Zara thought he might lean down and kiss her. Her breath caught at the possibility. Instead, Russell stepped back, releasing her hand. Good night, Miss Newsom, he said formally, though his eyes held something far from formality. Good night, Mr. Young, she replied, matching his tone while her heart raced beneath her nightdress. As she made her way back to her room, Zara acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with Russell Young. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. She'd come west seeking safety and a new beginning, not romantic entanglement. Yet somehow, this quiet, honorable man had worked his way past her careful defenses. Did he feel the same? There were moments when she thought he might when his gaze lingered on her across the dinner table, or his hand brushed hers as they worked together in the barn. But Russell kept his emotions carefully contained, and Zara had no experience in reading the subtle signals of a man's interest. The next morning brought no opportunity to reflect on the previous night's encounter. A telegram arrived from a cattle buyer in Chicago, requiring Russell's immediate attention. He would need to travel to Helena, the territorial capital, to meet with the buyer and possibly arrange a major sale. I'll be gone about a week, he explained as he packed a small valise. Sam knows what needs doing around the place, and Miguel will check on you both daily. We'll manage perfectly well, Ellen assured him. Won't we, Zara? Of course, Zara agreed, though the prospect of Russell's absence left her feeling strangely hollow. Safe travels. Just before mounting his horse, Russell paused beside Zara, who stood on the porch watching the preparations. About last night, he began, his voice too low for others to hear. I apologize if I spoke too freely. The darkness sometimes loosens a man's tongue. There's no need for apology, Zara replied. I valued your honesty. Russell studied her face for a moment. You're an unusual woman, Zara Newsom. Is that a compliment or an observation? She asked, smiling slightly. Both. The corner of his mouth lifted in that rare half-smile that always made her heart beat faster. I'll return as soon as I can. With that, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Zara wondering what might have been said if they'd had more time. The week of Russell's absence passed slowly. Zara threw herself into ranch work, helping Ellen preserve summer vegetables for the winter ahead and assisting Sam with minor repairs to the chicken coop. In the evenings, she wrote long letters to Martha Peterson in town, who had offered to post them to Zara's few remaining friends in Philadelphia. On the fourth day, an unexpected visitor arrived, Charlotte Wilcox, riding alone except for one of her father's ranch hands who waited at a respectful distance. "Miss Wilcox," Ellen greeted her with barely concealed surprise. "What brings you to Young's Crossing?" "I was passing by on my way to visit the Henderson family," Charlotte replied smoothly, though Young's Crossing was nowhere near the road to the doctor's ranch. "I thought I might pay a social call." Her gaze swept past Ellen to Zara, who stood in the doorway. "Miss Newsom, how are you finding ranch life?" "Very rewarding," Zara replied, stepping forward. "Won't you come in for some tea?" Charlotte followed them into the house, her critical gaze taking in the simple but comfortable furnishings. "Charming," she murmured in a tone that suggested the opposite. "So rustic." Ellen busied herself preparing tea while Zara engaged Charlotte in polite conversation about local families and the upcoming harvest festival. The visitor seemed distracted, her attention wandering to the personal touches that marked the home books stacked by Russell's chair. A half-finished quilt draped over Ellen's rocker, wildflowers Zara had arranged in a jar on the table. "I understand Russell is in Helena," Charlotte said finally, coming to the apparent purpose of her visit. "Business with cattle buyers," father said. "Yes," Ellen confirmed. "We expect him back in a few days." "Helena can be so diverting," Charlotte continued, a calculating look in her eyes. "Last time father and I visited, we attended the theater and several lovely parties. The territorial governor is quite social, you know." "Russ isn't one for parties," Ellen remarked dryly. "Perhaps not in the past." Charlotte smiled thinly. "But people change, especially when they encounter appropriate influences." Her gaze settled meaningfully on Zara. "Miss Newsom, I wonder if you realize how isolated life at Young's Crossing can be, particularly in winter. I've seen Eastern ladies wither away from loneliness out here." "I'm not easily discouraged, Miss Wilcox," Zara replied calmly. "No, how admirable." Charlotte set down her teacup. "Still, a woman of your background must sometimes long for more refined company. Father and I would be delighted to have you visit Wilcox Ranch. Our home is quite comfortable, built in the Eastern style, with proper furnishings from St. Louis." "That's very kind, but I'm quite content here." Zara met the other woman's gaze steadily. "I find authentic experiences more valuable than artificial comforts." Charlotte's eyes narrowed at the implied criticism. "How interesting that you should mention authenticity, Miss Newsom. I've been corresponding with friends in Philadelphia recently. They tell me the name Newsom has been associated with some rather unfortunate events." Zara's heart stuttered, but she kept her expression neutral. "Philadelphia society thrives on gossip, much of it baseless." "Perhaps." Charlotte smiled like a cat cornering a mouse. "But where there's smoke, well, I would hate to see Russell's reputation tarnished by association with any irregularity." The threat was thinly veiled. Before Zara could respond, Ellen spoke up, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. "I think you've overstayed your welcome, Charlotte. Russell's reputation is quite secure in this territory, as is his judgment regarding the character of those he welcomes into his home." Charlotte rose, smoothing her riding skirt. "Of course, I didn't mean to offend." Her insincere smile returned. "Do give Russell my regards when he returns. Father is most eager to discuss future collaborations with him." After she'd gone, Zara sank into a chair, her hands trembling slightly. "That woman is a viper," Ellen declared, sitting across from her. Pay her no mind, Zara. She's been investigating my past. Zara's voice was hollow. If she learns the full story about why I left Philadelphia. Ellen leaned forward. What happened, Zara? It can't be as bad as whatever Charlotte is implying. Zara hesitated, then decided Ellen deserved the truth. After my father died, my cousin Edward became my guardian. His interest in me went beyond appropriate family concern. When I refused his advances, he became angry, vindictive. He spread rumors that I had been behaving improperly with one of his friends, a married man. She swallowed hard. It wasn't true, but Edward was respected in society. People believed him. And you fled rather than face the scandal, Ellen concluded gently. Yes. Zara looked down at her hands. If Charlotte discovers this story, she could use it to turn Russell against me. Russ isn't easily manipulated, especially by the likes of Charlotte Wilcox. Ellen reached across to squeeze Zara's hand. But you should tell him the truth yourself, before she can twist it. Zara nodded, though the prospect of confessing her past to Russell filled her with dread. What if he believed the worst, as so many in Philadelphia had done? The thought of losing his respect, and perhaps something more, was almost unbearable. Russell returned from Helena 3 days later, arriving in the late afternoon with dust coating his clothes and weariness evident in his posture. Despite his obvious fatigue, his face lightened when he saw Zara and Ellen waiting on the porch. "Welcome home," Ellen called, hurrying to take his horse's reins. "How was Helena? Productive?" Russell dismounted stiffly. "Sold 30 head at a good price." The railroad's pushing closer, driving up demand. His gaze moved to Zara, lingering. "Everything all right here, we managed," Zara said, smiling despite her nervousness about the conversation to come. "Ellen taught me to make preserves, and Sam let me help with the new calf." "She's a natural," Ellen added. That difficult heifer let her approach without a fuss. Pride flickered in Russell's eyes. "I'm not surprised. You have a gentle way about you." The simple compliment warmed Zara through. "You must be tired after your journey." "I've prepared a stew for supper and there's fresh bread." "Sounds perfect." Russell's gaze remained on her face as though reacquainting himself with her features. "I missed the ranch." Later, after supper was cleared away and Ellen had retired for the evening, Zara found her opportunity. Russell sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. She joined him, her heart pounding. "Russell," she began hesitantly, "there's something I need to tell you." He turned toward her, concern immediately evident in his expression. "What is it?" "It's about why I left Philadelphia." Zara clasped her hands tightly in her lap. "Charlotte Wilcox came to visit while you were gone. She implied that she's been investigating my past." Russell's face hardened. "Charlotte has no right to pry into your affairs." "Perhaps not, but I'd rather you hear the truth from me than a distorted version from her." Zara took a deep breath and told him everything about Edward's unwanted attentions, his rage when rebuffed, the false rumors he'd spread, and her desperate flight west. Throughout her account, Russell remained silent, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When she finished, he stood abruptly, pacing the length of the porch before stopping before her. "This cousin of yours," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "If he were here now, he cut himself off, visibly reining in his anger. "I'm sorry, Zara. No woman should have to endure such treatment, especially from family." "You believe me then?" Zara asked, hope rising in her chest. Russell looked genuinely startled by the question. "Of course I believe you. Why wouldn't I?" Many in Philadelphia didn't. It was Edward's word against mine, and he was persuasive. I judge people by what I see with my own eyes. Russell's gaze was steady, unwavering. You've shown nothing but honesty, hard work, and courage since you arrived. That tells me all I need to know about your character." Relief washed through Zara, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thank you." Russell sat beside her again, closer than before. "As for Charlotte, I'll speak with her. Make it clear that spreading gossip about you would be unwise." "She seems determined to separate us," Zara observed, then blushed at the implication of her words. "I mean to discredit me in your eyes." "Charlotte wants Young's Crossing more than she wants me," Russell said bluntly. "Her father's been trying to buy this land for years. It adjoins their property and controls access to the best water in the county." He shook his head. "But this place isn't for sale, not at any price." "You love it here," Zara said, understanding dawning. "This isn't just property to you." "No." Russell's gaze swept over the ranch, the buildings glowing in the last light of day. "When I came west, I was broken. The war, my failed marriage, I was running from both. This land gave me purpose again. A future." His words resonated deeply with Zara. Wasn't that what she'd been seeking too? "A purpose, a future, a place to belong. I understand," she said softly. "Since coming here, I've felt possibilities opening before me that I never imagined in Philadelphia." Russell turned to her, something shifting in his eyes. "What kind of possibilities, Zara?" Her heart beat faster at the way he said her name. "A life of meaning, of connection." She hesitated, then added boldly, "of belonging." "You do belong here." Russell's voice deepened. "More than you know." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken emotion. Zara was acutely aware of his proximity, the scent of leather and horses that clung to him, the way his eyes darkened as they held hers. "Russell," she began, uncertain what she meant to say. Before she could continue, hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Russell stood, instantly alert as Sam rode up at a gallop. "Boss, fire at the north pasture line," the ranch hand called urgently. "Lightning strike by the look of it." Russell was moving before Sam finished speaking. "Get Miguel and Joe. I'll saddle up and meet you there." He turned back to Zara briefly. "Stay here with Ellen. We may be gone all night if it's spreading." Within minutes, he was riding away with Sam, leaving Zara on the porch with a sense of interrupted possibility hanging in the air. The fire proved to be relatively contained, a lightning strike that had caught in dry grass near the property line. Russell and the hands spent the night fighting it, returning at dawn exhausted, and smoke stained but successful in preventing major damage. Over the next few days, life at Young's Crossing returned to its normal rhythms. Zara found herself watching Russell often, wondering what might have been said if they hadn't been interrupted that night on the porch. For his part, Russell seemed more attentive than before, finding reasons to be near the house during the day and engaging Zara in longer conversations in the evenings. Ellen observed these developments with poorly concealed satisfaction. "My brother moves at his own pace," she commented to Zara one afternoon as they worked in the garden. "Slow and steady like everything else he does, but once his mind's made up, he doesn't waver." "About what?" Zara asked innocently, though her cheeks warmed. Ellen just smiled and returned to her weeding. The next Saturday, Russell announced his intention to visit town for supplies. "Would you like to come along, Zara?" he asked. "There's something I'd like to show you." Curious, Zara readily agreed. The drive to Montana City was pleasant, with late summer wildflowers blooming alongside the road and a gentle breeze tempering the August heat. Russell seemed more relaxed than usual, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his early days in the territory. When they reached town, Russell took care of his business at the mercantile and the bank, then suggested they visit a small building near the edge of town that Zara hadn't noticed before. "What is this place?" she asked as they approached the neat, whitewashed structure. "The Territorial Land Office," Russell replied. "I have some papers to sign." Inside, a bespectacled clerk greeted Russell warmly. "Mr. Young, I've got those documents ready for your signature, sir." As Russell examined and signed the papers, Zara wandered around the small office, studying maps of Montana territory pinned to the walls. The vastness of the region was staggering, hundreds of miles of mountains, plains, and rivers, much of it still unmarked except for major settlements and waterways. "All done," Russell announced, folding papers into his pocket. "Ready for the second stop." The second stop proved to be a small jewelry store tucked between the barber shop and a lawyer's office. Zara's heart began to pound as Russell held the door for her, though she chided herself for jumping to conclusions. The elderly proprietor nodded in recognition when they entered. "Mr. Young, right on time." He disappeared into a back room, returning with a small wooden box. "Just as you requested, sir." Russell thanked him, pocketing the box without opening it. Zara pretended great interest in a display of silver hair combs, avoiding Russell's gaze to hide her confusion and hope. Their final stop was the home of Reverend Thomas, the minister from the church they'd attended together. After a brief private conversation between Russell and the Reverend, they were invited to stay for tea. "Miss Newsom," the minister's wife greeted her warmly. "How lovely to see you again. Are you settling in well at Young's Crossing?" "Very well, thank you," Zara replied, accepting a cup of tea while trying to make sense of these unusual visits. The conversation remained general town gossip, the upcoming harvest festival, the progress of the church's new bell tower. Throughout, Russell seemed perfectly at ease, though Zara caught him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken on the drive back to the ranch. Russell pulled the wagon to a stop at the top of a hill overlooking Young's Crossing. The late afternoon sun bathed the buildings in golden light, and from this vantage point, Zara could see the full extent of the property, the house and outbuildings nestled beside the creek, pastures stretching toward the mountains, cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. "It's beautiful," she said, drinking in the view. "It's home," Russell replied simply. He turned to face her on the wagon seat, "Or at least I hope it could be." Zara's heart began to race. "Russell," he reached into his pocket and withdrew the wooden box from the jeweler's shop. "Zara, when you arrived in Montana City 3 months ago with nothing but your name and your courage, I thought I was simply honoring a debt to your father by offering you shelter." His voice deepened. "I didn't expect to find myself looking forward to seeing you each morning at breakfast. I didn't expect to discover that my home felt empty when you weren't in it." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring set with a small, perfect diamond. "I'm not a man of many words, Zara. The war took something from me that I thought was gone forever, the ability to hope for a future, to believe in possibilities. You've given that back to me." Zara's eyes filled with tears as Russell continued. "I love you. I think I started falling in love with you that first day, when you stood in the mercantile with nothing but your father's name and your own determination. I'm asking if you would consider building a future here with me on this land." He took her hand gently. "Will you marry me, Zara Newsom?" Joy bubbled up within her, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Russell, I love you too." His smile transformed his face, erasing years of solitude and struggle. Carefully, he slipped the ring onto her finger, then cupped her face in his calloused hands. "I've been wanting to do this since that night on the porch," he murmured, before leaning forward to kiss her. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the kiss tender at first, then deepening as Zara responded. She had been kissed before, chaste, proper kisses from Philadelphia suitors, but nothing like this. This was a promise, a beginning, a homecoming, When they finally broke apart, Russell rested his forehead against hers. I went to the land office today to register additional acreage in both our names. What's mine will be yours, Zara. Young's Crossing will belong to both of us. Zara was overwhelmed by the gesture. Russell, you don't have to, I want to, he interrupted gently. This isn't Philadelphia. Out here, a wife is a partner, not a possession. He smiled slightly. Though I'll confess selfish motives as well. If the land is legally yours too, Charlotte and her father can never get their hands on it, even if. He hesitated. Even if something happened to you, Zara finished softly, understanding his concern. In a territory where life could be precarious, such practical considerations were acts of love. The Reverend can marry us next Sunday if that suits you, Russell continued. Unless you'd prefer to wait, have a bigger celebration, Zara shook her head. I don't need a big wedding. Just you and Ellen and our friends here. She looked down at the ring glinting on her finger, still hardly believing this turn of events. When I came west with nothing but a name, I never imagined I'd find everything. Russell's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer on the wagon seat. Your name was all I needed, he said simply. Everything else we'll build together. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Montana City and the surrounding ranches. Ellen was ecstatic, hugging Zara fiercely when they returned home and immediately beginning plans for the wedding meal and preparations to the house. I knew it, she declared triumphantly. From the moment he brought you home, I saw something change in him. It was just a matter of time. Not everyone received the news with equal enthusiasm. 3 days after Russell's proposal, Richard Wilcox arrived at Young's Crossing, his expression thunderous as he demanded to speak with Russell alone. The two men disappeared into the barn for nearly an hour, their voices occasionally rising enough to carry across the yard. Though Zara couldn't make out the words, when they emerged, Wilcox mounted his horse without a backward glance, spurring the animal to a gallop as he left the property. Russell's face was set in hard lines as he strode toward the house. What happened? Zara asked, meeting him on the porch. Russell's expression softened as he looked at her. Wilcox is under the impression that I've made a grave mistake. He offered to double his previous offer for Young's Crossing if I'd reconsider certain personal decisions. He tried to buy you away from me, Zara translated, a cold feeling settling in her stomach. He tried. Russell took her hands in his. I told him Young's Crossing isn't for sale at any price, and neither are my affections. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. Wilcox isn't used to being refused. He made some threats, said he'd use his influence with the railroad committee to ensure the spur line goes through Wilcox property instead of near our land. Can he do that? Possibly. It would hurt us financially. Having the railroad nearby would increase the value of our cattle significantly. Russell shrugged. But we'll manage either way. This ranch was profitable before the railroad came to Montana territory, and it will remain so. What about Charlotte? Zara asked hesitantly. Her father spoke for both of them. Russell's mouth tightened. Though he implied certain information about your past in Philadelphia might become common knowledge if I proceeded with our marriage. Alarm shot through Zara. Russell, if they spread those rumors here, let them try, Russell interrupted firmly. Anyone who knows you won't believe a word. And those who would believe such gossip aren't worth our concern. He cupped her cheek gently. I won't let Wilcox or anyone else come between us, Zara. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. His certainty calmed her fears. This wasn't Philadelphia, where reputation was everything and gossip could destroy lives. Here in Montana territory, people were judged by their actions, their character, their willingness to stand by their word. The week leading up to their wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Ellen insisted on sewing Zara a proper wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of cream-colored fabric ordered from the mercantile's finest stock. Martha Peterson and several other women from town arrived to help with preparations, turning the simple ceremony into a community celebration. "A wedding at Young's Crossing," Martha exclaimed as she helped arrange flowers in the parlor. "We haven't had such excitement since the governor visited last spring." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with the first hint of autumn crispness in the air. Zara stood at her bedroom window, watching the sun rise over the mountains that had become so dear to her in just a few short months. How far she had traveled, not just the physical distance from Philadelphia to Montana territory, but the journey from fear to hope, from loneliness to belonging. She thought of her father, wishing he could have known Russell in peacetime, could have seen the man his lieutenant had become. "He would have approved," she whispered to the dawn. "He would have been so happy for us." A knock at her door interrupted her reflections. Ellen entered, already dressed in her best blue gown, her eyes suspiciously bright. "It's time to get ready, my dear," she said, carrying a box. "But first, a gift from Russ. He asked me to bring it to you." Inside the box lay a delicate gold locket on a fine chain, not new, but well cared for and obviously precious. "It was our mother's," Ellen explained, lifting it gently. "Russ has kept it all these years. He wants you to have it to wear today." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes as Ellen fastened the locket around her neck. It nestled against her collarbone, a tangible connection to the family she was joining. "There's a note as well," Ellen added, handing Zara a folded piece of paper. In Russell's strong, clear handwriting were a few simple lines. "Zara, you came west with nothing but your name, you said. But you brought so much more courage, grace, and a heart generous enough to love a man still finding his way back from the darkness. I'll spend my life proving worthy of that love. Yours always, Russell." By the time Zara descended the stairs 2 hours later, the house was filled with guests, townspeople, neighboring ranchers, and the hands from Young's Crossing, all dressed in their Sunday best. Reverend Thomas waited in the parlor beside Russell, who stood tall and straight in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his beard trimmed. When Russell turned and saw her, the naked emotion in his eyes took Zara's breath away. In that moment, all her doubts and fears vanished. This was right. This was where she belonged. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. Zara and Russell spoke their vows clearly, their hands clasped tightly together as they promised to love and honor each other for all their days. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Russell's kiss was gentle but full of promise, bringing cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing on the packed earth of the yard, lanterns hanging from trees to illuminate the gathering as darkness fell. Zara moved through it all in a happy daze, scarcely believing that this joyful occasion was for them. Not everyone from the community attended. The Wilcoxes were noticeably absent, though no one seemed surprised by this. "Charlotte's probably burning her handkerchiefs in frustration," Martha Peterson commented wryly to Zara during the festivities. "But don't you worry about her. Russell Young made the right choice, and everyone knows it." As the last guests departed and Ellen tactfully retired to her room, Zara found herself alone with her husband for the first time. Russell took her hand, leading her up the stairs, not to her small room under the eaves, but to the master bedroom at the end of the hall. "Welcome home, Mrs. Young," he said softly, closing the door behind them. The room was simply furnished but comfortable, with a large bed covered in one of Ellen's quilts, a chest of drawers, and a washstand. A small bouquet of late wildflowers stood in a jar on the bedside table. Ellen's touch, no doubt. Shyness overcame Zara suddenly. For all her 22 years, she knew little of what happened between husband and wife in the privacy of their bedroom. Her mother had died before such conversations could take place, and Philadelphia society considered such topics unsuitable for unmarried ladies. Russell seemed to sense her nervousness. "We have all the time in the world, Zara," he said gently, taking her hands in his. "Nothing need happen tonight that you're not ready for." His consideration touched her deeply. "It's not that I'm unwilling," she explained, her cheeks warming. "I'm just uncertain, inexperienced." Russell's smile was tender as he drew her into his arms. "Then we'll learn together. I'm no expert myself. My first marriage was brief and not happy." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "But I think when there's love, the rest follows naturally." His kiss was different from those they'd shared before, deeper, more intimate, with an underlying passion that sent heat spiraling through Zara's body. She responded instinctively, her arms twining around his neck, pressing closer to the solid warmth of him. What followed was a gentle discovery of each other. Russell was patient, tender, his hands reverent as he helped her undress, his eyes darkening with desire as she stood before him in her thin chemise. When they came together at last, the initial discomfort gave way to pleasure so intense it brought tears to Zara's eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming intimacy of their union. Afterward, cradled in Russell's arms as moonlight spilled through the window, Zara felt a profound sense of peace. This was home, not just the ranch or the territory, but this man, this connection that transcended the physical to touch something deeper within her soul. "Happy," Russell murmured, his lips against her temple. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" His arms tightened around her. "More than I believed possible. When I came west after the war, I thought I was leaving everything behind, my past, my pain, any chance at the kind of happiness my parents had." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I never imagined I'd find it all here with Colonel Newsom's daughter." "Life has strange paths," Zara mused, thinking of the unlikely journey that had brought her to this moment. "If my father hadn't spoken of you, if I hadn't remembered your name." "But you did," Russell said simply, "and that's all that matters." The years that followed brought both joys and challenges to Young's Crossing. True to his threat, Richard Wilcox used his influence to ensure the railroad spur line bypassed Russell's property, forcing them to drive their cattle farther to reach the shipping point. But Russell's reputation for quality stock overcame this obstacle, and the ranch continued to prosper. Charlotte eventually married a wealthy banker from Helena and moved away from Montana City, much to the relief of both Russell and Zara. Richard Wilcox maintained a cold civility in his dealings with the Youngs, though he never again mentioned buying their property. Ellen remained at Young's Crossing, moving to a small but comfortable cabin Russell built for her near the main house. "I couldn't leave," she explained when Zara worried about intruding on her privacy. "This is home. Besides, someone needs to help you with those children you'll have." Ellen's prediction proved accurate. In the spring following their wedding, Zara discovered she was expecting their first child. Thomas James Young was born on a snowy December night in 1879, with Ellen and Martha Peterson assisting in the delivery while Russell paced anxiously outside the bedroom door. "A son," Zara whispered tiredly when Russell was finally allowed to enter. "He has your eyes." Russell's face, as he gazed down at his newborn son, held a wonder Zara had never seen before. "He's perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Like his mother." 2 years later, their daughter Elizabeth Ellen arrived, followed by another son, Samuel, in 1883. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, growing strong and confident under their parents' loving guidance. Young's Crossing expanded as well. Russell's careful breeding program produced cattle sought after throughout the territory, and his fair dealings earned him respect even from those who had initially been skeptical of the Eastern lady he'd married. Zara found her own place in the community, eventually helping to establish Montana City's first proper library and serving on the school board. The education she'd received in Philadelphia proved valuable in a territory hungry for knowledge and refinement. In the autumn of 1888, a decade after Zara had stepped off the stagecoach with nothing but a name and desperate hope, she stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching Russell teaching Thomas to rope a calf in the yard. Elizabeth sat on the steps nearby, carefully sewing a doll's dress under Ellen's supervision, while 4-year-old Samuel chased the chickens with more enthusiasm than skill. The ranch had grown to nearly 2,000 acres, with a herd of 500 cattle bearing the Young's Crossing brand. The original log house had been expanded with proper wooden siding, glass windows from St. Louis, and a second wing that provided bedrooms for their growing family and occasional guests. It wasn't Philadelphia, no gaslit streets, no grand opera house, no society balls. But Zara had found something far more valuable here. A true partnership with a man who respected her mind as well as her heart, children who were growing up strong and kind, and a community where she was valued for her contributions rather than her family name or social standing. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Young." Russell's voice broke into her reverie as he joined her on the porch, his arm slipping comfortably around her waist. "I was thinking how fortunate I am," Zara replied, leaning into his embrace. "How strange and wonderful that the greatest loss of my life led to its greatest blessing." Russell's eyes, still as blue and direct as they had been that first day in Montana City, softened as he looked at her. A few more lines crinkled at the corners now, and silver threaded more prominently through his dark hair, but to Zara, he was more handsome than ever. "I'm the fortunate one," he said quietly. "You gave me a second chance at life, Zara, at happiness." "We gave each other that chance," she corrected gently. "That day in the Mercantile, when you said my name was all you needed, did you mean it?" Russell smiled, the full, unguarded smile that had once been so rare but now appeared regularly, especially when he looked at her or their children. "I meant it," he said, drawing her closer. "But what you brought was so much more. You brought yourself, your courage, your kindness, your faith in possibilities. You made Young's Crossing a true home." As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the land in gold and crimson, Zara thought of how far she had come from that desperate young woman who had fled Philadelphia with nothing but a name and a prayer. The journey had not been easy, but every step had led her here to this man, these children, this life built on love and mutual respect. "Home," she echoed, watching Thomas successfully rope the practice calf, his whoop of triumph bringing answering cheers from his siblings. "Yes, that's exactly what it is." Russell's kiss was as tender as it had been on their wedding day, a testament to a love that had only deepened with time and shared experiences. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers in the gesture that had become so familiar over their years together. "I love you, Zara Young," he said simply, "today and always." "And I love you," she replied, her heart full, "for giving me a name even better than the one I came with." As twilight settled over Young's Crossing, and their children raced up the porch steps, demanding supper and attention in equal measure, Zara sent a silent thank you to her father for his friendship with a young lieutenant, for the stories that had planted a name in her memory, for the courage he had instilled in her that had allowed her to journey west with nothing but that name and find, against all odds, everything her heart had ever desired.